Yuji is an unfortunate boy. He carries a haunting past within him. Then, Yuji arrives at Mahama Academy. He accidentally meets several girls. Each of them carries an invisible wound. And once again, Yuji is pushed to his limits, between life and death. But this upcoming battle is no longer for Yuji himself. It's for the girls who chose to trust him. This is not just a fight for freedom. It's also a journey toward paradise. And hello everyone. Welcome back to Oni-chan. To find out whether Yuji's journey will succeed or not, let's all stay tuned with Oni-chan. After everything came to an end, Amane slowly revealed the truth to everyone. Yuji's older sister was actually her classmate. And the only survivor of that accident was Amane. So she blamed herself for leaving Kazuki behind, which led to Yuji's life becoming a tragedy. However, everyone still knew very little about Yuji's past. So they all set out together to find the answers. It turns out, since he was little, Yuji's master was the one who raised him. And everything was under the watch of Yuria. That master's name was Asako. But when they first met, Yuji was always quiet and distant. He kept his distance from everyone around him. This made both Asako and Yuria feel troubled, as they didn't know how to take care of Yuji. By chance, Asako discovered many wounds on his body, because Yuji had been abused both physically and mentally. So Asako made up her mind to protect him no matter what. However, she was completely hopeless at cooking. This seemed to be a major obstacle for Asako. Luckily, she had Yuria to help her. After that, Yuji gained a new companion, and his mission was to take care of this dog. Thanks to this, Yuji slowly began to open his heart, which eased Asako and Yuria's worries a little. To Asako, Yuji was an intelligent child. He remembered everything Asako had taught him, and he was always willing to learn more. Because of that, Asako was determined to stay by his side. Days passed, and Yuria was shocked when Asako submitted her resignation, because she knew this wasn't something simple. Asako had long been an agent of an underground organization. But when Asako made that decision, it meant she was choosing to accept her own death. Yuria believed the main reason was Yuji. He was the one who changed the thoughts inside Asako's mind. But to Asako, that wasn't the only reason. Her vision was gradually deteriorating, so she would no longer be capable of completing assigned missions. Her purpose after resigning was to train the next generation. As for Yuji, Asako would take him everywhere with her. She taught Yuji that running fast would make him stand out. Next, he needed to be good at fighting. And Asako would help Yuji understand the difference between strength and violence. Asako believed it would all depend on Yuji. And so, he used every method to try and defeat Asako. To Asako, the most important thing was having a vast knowledge. It would make Yuji stand out in a crowd when he grew up. Asako believed reading books was an effective method. It would become both wisdom and the source of life for Yuji. When night fell, Yuji suddenly grew curious about Asako's profession. So Asako revealed to him that she had worked for an anti-terrorism alliance. And her specific job was to eliminate enemies. The enemies were those who committed crimes against the country. Unexpectedly, Asako became interested in teaching Yuji how to shoot. So the next morning, she took Yuji to a shooting range. And the reward for Yuji if he hit the target set by Asako was a gun. At that moment, Yuji quickly picked up each part and examined it carefully. Asako gave him some advice. People must give their all to strive toward their own goals. No matter what they do, those kinds of people will never fail. After hearing that, Yuji asked to call Asako his master. Because to Yuji, Asako wasn't a mother, nor a sister, and certainly not a father. So Yuji decided to see Asako as his master. In the days that followed, they continued practicing shooting together. But this time, Yuji failed to hit the target. Later, while Yuji was at home, he suddenly encountered a fierce bear. And it had taken away Yuji's dog. Yuji then made up his mind to chase after it and kill the vicious bear. But it turned out the bear was bringing food back to its cubs, which made Yuji hesitate and unable to pull the trigger. In the end, he returned to Asako in disappointment. Yuji felt that he was truly useless, and he burst into tears in front of Asako. But she gently held him in her arms to comfort him. Once again, Yuji had failed to protect something important to him, and he was tired of running away. Yuji was determined to move forward, so he wanted to become strong like Asako. However, Asako believed it wouldn't be that easy. Even so, she agreed with Yuji's decision, and Yuji promised he would try hard enough not to die. Back to the present, Yuji realized that during that time, Asako's health had begun to deteriorate. He noticed many unusual signs from her, so Yuji became deeply worried, because Asako was the only one left by his side. But every time, Asako insisted that there was nothing wrong with her, until one day, the underground organization assigned a mission to Asako. Due to health reasons, she didn't show up, so Yuji went to the meeting point alone. A few days later, Yuria came to visit Asako. However, she was furious, because Asako had ignored her when she tried to thank her for the recent mission. But Asako told the truth, that it wasn't her, it was actually Yuji. At that moment, Yuria was shocked, because this was a very serious matter to her. But it was the only way for Yuji to repay Asako's kindness. At that moment, Yuria felt regret, because Yuji had struggled so hard to escape the bloody world of his childhood. And now it had returned. However, Yuji now needed a reason to live, so he was thinking about joining Asako. But Yuria advised Yuji to think carefully about it. Then she became angry, and took Yuji somewhere else to have a serious talk. Yuria understood Yuji's current reason and purpose for living. But this couldn't be the only path for him. Yet Yuji had made up his mind to follow Asako's path, and make it his own. Of course, he would give it his all, because he wanted to repay both Asako and Yuria. After things were made clear, in the end, Yuria agreed to take care of everything else. And so, Yuji took his first step into Asako's world. The next day, Asako announced Yuji would be going to America, and he would attend a naval academy to earn a certificate. Of course, Asako would also follow Yuji closely, but she would find a job at a shooting school, so Yuji would have to take care of himself, because they would be apart for a while. And so, Yuji arrived in America. He started getting used to the place, and Yuji met several new companions. Among them was Danio. The next day, Yuji's first training session officially began. Everyone was shocked by how strict the captain was. Her name was Garrett, and she was also an acquaintance of Asako. The training sessions became increasingly harsh. Danio revealed to Yuji that he didn't like Garrett either. Suddenly, she overheard everything from behind, so Garrett taught Danio a lesson. The next day, everyone was surprised by Yuji's abilities, and a girl started to take notice of him. Her name was Millie. She approached Yuji. However, Millie was extremely troublesome, so Yuji warned her not to come near him again. Turns out, Millie wanted a gunfight to determine the winner between them. And so, they showed up at the shooting range. This time, Millie was surprised by Yuji's genius-level skills. Eventually, the first semester came to an end, and in the next semester, Yuji had to go out to sea for combat training. During the days Yuji trained according to plan, he felt like he was starting to find his place. Unfortunately, Danio died during the training session. Everyone was deeply saddened, because during training, Yuji had met several companions, each of them with their own weaknesses, making Yuji's team a very problematic one. At that moment, Yuji realized he still hadn't overcome his fear of death. During their break time, Yuji happened to run into Edward, the person he had coached in shooting. Thanks to Yuji, Edward was still here, and squad leader Justin also appeared to get to know everyone. To Justin, Yuji's team was full of troublemakers, which actually inspired Justin greatly, because he himself used to be one of them too. At this moment, Justin seriously reminded everyone justice does not exist on the battlefield, and they had to work hard to eliminate the obstacles ahead. However, Yuji felt like he had stepped into a strange place. They were dispatched to several locations for reinforcement, and everyone had to plant landmines day and night. At that moment, Yuji spotted the enemy, so everyone got into position to contain them. But Yuji was still struggling with his lingering trauma. Luckily, Millie was by his side to comfort him, which gave Yuji even more motivation. Everyone also trusted in Yuji's shooting skills, so they worked together with him to attack. Although Danio wasn't the smartest, he always treated his teammates as friends. It was clear that Danio was a good person. As for Millie, she trusted Yuji more than anyone else, and Edward always respected him. At that moment, they were fighting to protect Yuji. Justin was encouraging Yuji, so he could overcome his fear and fight the enemy. This time, Yuji was completely determined to take them down. And Justin gave him the strength he needed. As a result, Yuji took out each enemy one by one. A while later, Yuji woke up. Everything had come to an end. Because reinforcements arrived just in time. The enemy retreated. Yuji was surprised that he was still alive. Because by his side were still wonderful teammates. After 2 months of training, everyone had gotten used to it. Yuji had gradually grown accustomed to the sound of gunfire. He no longer trembled like before. And so, their mission had come to an end, and they were allowed to return to their homeland. Yuji kept everything to himself and told no one about what had happened on the battlefield. Because to Yuji, it was truly a cruel experience. After that, Yuji followed orders and returned to Japan. At that moment, Garrett also admired his talent. As for Millie, she felt regretful that she could no longer see Yuji. However, Millie had to accept it. Asako was waiting for Yuji in front of the house. She was happy that he had returned. Days passed. While Yuji was carrying out a new mission, he heard that Asako had collapsed. Her condition was extremely dangerous at the time. So Yuji hurried back home. Asako's health kept getting worse. This time, Yuji was truly worried for her. He was afraid that Asako might die this time. At that moment, Yuji felt he would no longer have a reason to live. Asako now felt regret for training Yuji in such skills, just to lead him into such a dark profession. Suddenly, Yuji broke into tears after hearing Asako's heartfelt confession. Now that Asako was nearing death, she had finally come to understand the meaning of life. However, Yuji didn't agree with Asako. He had accepted to live alongside her, because she was the one who gave his life a reason. At this moment, he could no longer hold back his emotions. But Asako believed, from now on, Yuji could live for himself. Even if he failed, he could still keep moving forward, on the path he had chosen on his own. A while later, Yuria believed Asako wouldn't make it through the day. Yet she had no idea what she could do. Yuji could only sit quietly beside Asako. Right then, Asako recalled old memories. Back when Yuji had first arrived, he used to sneak out of his room late at night, just to gaze at the stars in the sky. Asako didn't know what Yuji had been thinking at the time, but Yuji himself couldn't remember either. At that moment, Asako fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, and after that, she never woke up again. Yuria took care of everything. She remembered the memories from their childhood. Yuria and Asako used to play together a long time ago. The two of them had relied on and cared for each other. That made it impossible for Yuria to ever forget. As for Yuji, he wondered, when he died, would he be able to go to the same place as Asako? But Yuji pushed aside that foolish thought, because he remembered Asako's teachings about how to keep on living. Since Yuria couldn't bear to see Yuji alone in his loneliness, she moved him into her place. And so, they began to live together. But living with Yuria only made Yuji think of Asako even more, which made Yuria uncomfortable about the situation, although Yuji himself couldn't do anything about it. So after that, Yuria often found excuses not to come home. Feeling disheartened, Yuji decided to leave for a while, although he didn't know where to go. For now, he would go somewhere to explore. Eventually, Yuji found many new paths ahead of him. There, he also met many people. However, Yuji would return home without having found any truth. At that moment, he didn't know what to do next. Suddenly, Yuji wanted to relive his youth, and he decided to enroll in a normal school. That was why Yuji entered Mahama Academy. Meanwhile, due to a leak in the information from Yuria's secretary, a report needed to be sent to Yuria. So Yuji left immediately afterward. At the dorm, after everyone learned about Yuji's past, they didn't know how to face him anymore. But Sakari thought that treating him normally was the best thing to do. On Yuji's way home, he suddenly received a mission from the underground organization. It was a sniper assignment under level 9 orders, and everything had been prepared in advance. At that point, Yuji was ready to act. He had his target in his sights. But shockingly, the person turned out to be Yuji's foster father. That man was Oslo. Yuji couldn't believe his eyes. As for Chizuru, at that moment, she didn't know where Yuji was or what he was doing, but it made everyone deeply worried. At this point, Chizuru revealed, since he was a child, Yuji had been raised by Oslo. Oslo was an international terrorist, and currently, Oslo was in Japan. There was information suggesting that the government was looking for someone to assassinate him. At this point, Sakari believed that they might use UG as a bridge between the nation and the terrorists. It was possible UG was being set up as a bargaining chip. And he was surely in a dangerous situation. UG had now become entangled in national political affairs. So Chizuru hoped that Sakaki's group wouldn't do anything that could worsen UG's situation. Suddenly, Chizuru added another piece of news. Mahama Academy would soon be shut down. Because the financial resources had run out. This shocked and saddened everyone. But at the moment, they still had to focus on Yuji's situation. Michiru became curious about how Saki knew so much about Yuji's background. So she led everyone to a certain room. There, some things about all of them were written on the walls. It turned out Yuji had always been thinking about them. Then, Makina accidentally discovered something shocking. Yuji once had the intention to take his own life. Before that, he had successfully saved the 5 girls at Mahama Academy. Yuji felt that it was finally time for him to leave this world. Just like Asako, that thought made everyone even more worried. At that moment, Yuria called to deliver some news. Yuji would temporarily be held in a detention facility. And he didn't want to see any of the girls. Because he didn't want to hurt them any further. But Yuria understood how he felt. So she asked everyone to respect his wishes. However, for Makina, this wasn't something to take lightly. Makina was determined to rescue Yuji. No matter what, even if she had to do it alone, she would still act. Even Saki agreed with her on this. And they needed Sakari's help as well. Because she had a good amount of investigative skills. On top of that, Sakari was quick-witted and resourceful. So, they began preparing for action. The group gathered a lot of useful information. But they still hadn't confirmed Yuji's exact location. It turned out Sakari was still in the middle of verifying the data. And she planned to personally meet the person who leaked the information. When she arrived, Sakari thought she had been tricked. But eventually, the man showed up. It turned out to be Robert, the one who had trained with Yuji in the US military program. Robert then revealed Yuji's current location, and how the government had used Yuji as a bargaining chip in negotiations with Oslo. But the situation was far more complicated than that. After Sakari returned to the school, she continued searching for more information about Yuji. Through Robert, Sakari discovered other important clues. However, the more Sakari learned, the more confused she became. What Sakari needed to do now was to stop the reckless actions of those girls. For the time being, that was the only role Sakari could take on. As for Michiru, she felt helpless in the current situation, not knowing what to do. But Michiru thought that if anything were to happen, then it would be her fault. That thought gave Michiru a terrible headache. Several days later, Chizuru made an announcement. Mahama Academy would officially be closed starting today. And from now on, Chizuru would be offering guidance about what comes next. However, each person still had the right to decide for themselves. But Chizuru hoped they would all think carefully. And so, not long after, Sakari and Amane began preparing to leave one by one. But Sakari spoke up first, saying that if they left, they would never be able to return to their school days again. However, Amane was already tired of constantly running away. So this time, she followed what her reason told her to do. Amane was ready to throw everything aside. When the two of them reached the gate, they ran into Saki and Makina. They would all embark on the upcoming journey together. Everyone was still waiting for Michiru. But she never showed up. So they decided to leave without her. They officially stepped out of Mahama Academy. At that moment, Michiru suddenly appeared. She was angry that everyone had left her behind. And in the end, Michiru decided to go with them. Unexpectedly, their new dormitory turned out to be a ship. Sakari had bought it because it made it easier to hide when necessary. As for Yuji, he happened to run into Kazuki. However, Yuji knew that his sister had already died long ago. But Kazuki explained that before she died, the rescue team had quickly preserved hundreds of millions of her brain cells to develop into a computer system. And because of that, Kazuki was now able to talk to Yuji. She really wished she could have met Yuji sooner. But there was nothing Kazuki could do to save him at the time. At this moment, Kazuki was curious whether Yuji would be willing to sacrifice himself for the country. And to her surprise, he agreed without hesitation. However, Yuji still didn't know what to do. So Kazuki revealed that Oslo had secretly smuggled a nuclear bomb into Japan. Although its size was very small, it was a weapon of immense power. Even the government couldn't do anything about it. So they decided to use Yuji to negotiate with Oslo. Because Yuji was the most precious person to Oslo, it turned out that Yuji was the sole survivor of Oslo's mysterious project. So in the end, Kazuki wanted Yuji to track down Oslo, and he had to kill him. As for Sakari's group, she had found out Yuji's exact location. But aside from that, they had no other information. At that moment, Michiru received a call from a stranger. The caller was representing a group, and introduced herself as Thanatos. Thanatos knew that under the current circumstances, Sakari's group couldn't do much either. So it was best for them to follow Thanatos' plan. Because she wasn't creating enemies, she was supporting justice. Thanatos always chose the path of coexistence. She informed everyone that a terrorist named Oslo was currently threatening Japan, and he was planning to attack the government. That's why Thanatos would be the one to punish Oslo. At this point, Thanatos proposed a reliable plan to them. However, everything would depend on Sakari's group's willingness. And so, everyone agreed to the decision. As for Yuji, Kazuki told him about the accident, after she sacrificed herself for Amane. That night, the others easily took control of Kazuki. While Amane managed to escape, the others ended up killing each other one by one. As for the teacher, he blamed himself for acting foolishly, for letting his emotions get the better of him and committing horrible acts. And in the days that followed, only the teacher and Kazuki survived. Kazuki then left a message for Amane. Days later, based on Amane's testimony, the police and investigation team went to the accident site. At that time, Kazuki was still alive and was taken to a hospital. However, the hospital director made a decision. They would use Kazuki's brain as the foundation for the Thanatos system, and apply it in national security and defense. It took several years of research, and that's how Kazuki became the Thanatos system we know today. And then, Yuji finally understood everything. The matter with Oslo was his own personal battle. Yuji would have to deal with it by himself. After a short time, Yuji successfully made contact with Oslo. As for Yuria, she was the one in charge of Yuji. So now, the higher-ups were keeping an eye on Yuria. However, she seemed to be used to that already. And it was possible that Yuji would embrace death for his country. Sakari's group was now listening to Thanatos explain the plan. She knew the exact time of Yuji's movements. But first, everyone needed to earn money in order to regain their strength. Specifically, they needed about 100 million in their account, and Thanatos assigned that responsibility to Sakari. However, she knew that the task wouldn't be easy. That's why everyone would start with a small amount, and slowly build it up over time. A while later, they began acting according to the plan given to them, and it seemed like everything was going smoothly. After that, Saki and Makina went to pick up a special item. It turned out to be a gun prepared by Thanatos. The two of them stayed behind to customize the gun to their liking. And then, they quickly returned to the ship. But Saki was worried about Makina. She was afraid Makina might go overboard, especially now that Makina had a gun in her hands. However, Makina firmly stated she could handle everything just fine. She would do it the way Yuji had taught her. So Saki felt a bit more at ease. Although it was late, they finally returned to the ship. It turned out that the item Thanatos had bought was heavier than Makina had expected, and they had to stop by a store to get some related tools. After a long day, everyone was hungry. Surprisingly, it was Sakari who had prepared everything. Later, Michiru was satisfied with the soup she had just eaten. That made Sakari happy with her efforts. Today, Michiru had followed Thanatos' instructions, so she had managed to go to many different places. Suddenly, Thanatos called everyone. The preparations had gone smoothly. So now, Thanatos outlined several detailed tasks. Everyone focused on listening carefully. Their goal would be to rescue Yuji by force. And Thanatos had provided the exact time for the operation. Unlike the others, Yuria was completely idle at the moment. However, she accidentally found out that Sakari's group was already taking action. As for Yuji, he was being watched closely by Oslo. However, Oslo still remained extremely cautious around him, because he knew Yuji's combat capabilities. Then came the day of the girls' operation. The place they were heading to would be filled with tragedy and countless dangers waiting ahead. It was time to act. Sakari, as the commander, promised she wouldn't let everyone's passion go to waste, and she believed everyone would give their best to reach the shared goal. Machina went to a suitable location prepared by Thanatos. She would aim at the vehicle escorting Yuji. Her mission was to stop those transport vehicles using 6 bullets that had been prepared. As for Amane, she would receive a car so that she could move around. Michiru would contact someone from Yuji's company and go retrieve the item he had provided. Saki would be in charge of crafting weapons. However, she had to be extremely careful with this mission. At this point, Thanatos had successfully made preparations according to the plan. The remaining critical part would be decided by Sakari. She was worried that Thanatos might suddenly vanish in the middle of it all. Because Kazuki realized Thanatos had planned everything thoroughly. And that was absolutely true. Even Thanatos himself doesn't know when he might be suspended by the server. But even when unfortunate events happen, everyone still has to keep fighting with all their effort. By the afternoon, Yuji was scheduled to be escorted to the court in Akasaka. Sakari had obtained the information. She quickly informed her teammates. Machina got ready to follow the plan. Suddenly, a third party intervened, and Yuji was taken to the vehicle of an armed group. Unfortunately, a bomb had been planted on his body. Only Oslo had the key to deactivate it. If Yuji wanted to stay safe, the only way was to return to Oslo. At that moment, Machina switched to another plan. She caused them to move quickly. But Machina managed to stop them. Next came Sachi's mission. Saki confused the enemy with a weapon she had built herself. She quickly got Yuji into Amane's car to escape, and everyone successfully made their initial getaway. Meanwhile, Oslo's men were conducting an emergency investigation. They were rapidly closing in on the escape vehicle. But Oslo remained calm, because he knew Yuji had a bomb implanted in him. Eventually, Yuji would come back to him on his own. So for now, Oslo was just sitting and waiting. Because Oslo was certain that no one could deactivate it. On Thanatos' side, she now seemed to have been detected by the system, so her capabilities were restricted. But she had already prepared a plan beforehand. Amane only needed to follow the guided map exactly. Suddenly, a helicopter attacked everyone. It caused massive confusion among them. But their situation was extremely dangerous. Unexpectedly, another helicopter appeared. It was Millie, Yuji's former teammate from America. She quickly launched an attack on the enemy, and successfully rescued everyone. But at that moment, Thanatos also lost connection. The only way was to detach her from the system. Thanks to that, Kazuki was freed from Thanatos. A while later, following Thanatos' earlier map, Amane drove at an incredibly high speed to jump over the ship. And finally, they were reunited. Suddenly, Kazuki appeared in front of everyone. They were all deeply shocked. After such a long time, Amane was finally able to meet Kazuki again. She was overwhelmed with emotion. So Amane hugged Kazuki tightly and wouldn't let go. At that moment, everyone began splitting up to handle their tasks. And they all looked around together. Sakari took inventory of all the cargo on the ship. The two of them were thinking about their next plans. A while later, Yuji finally woke up. He was surprised to see Justin there. It turned out Justin was the captain. And he was also the one steering the ship. Suddenly, a girl named Graham appeared. She informed Justin that Sakaki wanted to meet him to ask for advice on the next move. At that moment, Graham approached Yuji. Yuji was her enemy. It turned out that in the past, a journalist had written an article about Oslo. But on the way to the newspaper office, he accidentally hit a girl with his car. In a panic, the man rushed her to the hospital. Unexpectedly, she was one of Oslo's soldiers, and she used a pen to stab the man to death. Shockingly, that girl was Yuji, and the man he killed was Graham's father. But right now, she couldn't do anything, because if she shot Yuji, everyone on the ship would be blown to pieces. So Yuji promised to talk to Graham once everything was over. Meanwhile, on Chizoru's side, she was surprised to learn that she would become the new owner of the ship. And its name would be Mahama Academy. Chizoru would still serve as the principal at this new place. At that moment, Yuji met his sister again. He was curious about Kazuki's next plans. This time, she wanted everyone to go to an island. And that island belonged to Yuji. It was bought and gifted to him by Asako. This completely shocked Yuji. In the end, he hugged Kazuki and broke down in tears. Because Yuji was extremely worried about her. Right then, he made up his mind to take down Oslo. A while later, Millie happily ran toward Yuji. Unexpectedly, he punched Millie in the face. The girls were shocked by Yuji's action. It turned out Yuji was angry. Because Millie had tried hard to become a pilot. But because of Yuji, she gave up everything, so Yuji couldn't control himself. Now that he had seen everyone again, Yuji sincerely thanked them for their actions. Thanks to them, he still knew there was a place he could return to. And now it was time for Yuji to face Oslo. He was determined to return. Yuria was also there. She advised Yuji to give up. Because Oslo was a difficult opponent to deal with. But at this point, Yuji had no way back. And it was Oslo himself who caused the death of the most important woman in Yuji's life. Even though Yuji knew he couldn't bring Asako back to life, he just wanted to eliminate the man he hated most. At that moment, Yuria began to cry, because she knew this path would be a tough one. Back on Kazuki's side, she was planning how to deal with the Thanatos system. Because Kazuki believed that within a few hours, Oslo would succeed in taking control of the Thanatos system. So Kazuki thought that destroying it would be the best option. Right now, Millie was the one who would take Yuji to Oslo. But she still didn't understand Yuji's true reason for fighting. It turned out Yuji simply wanted to make sure that everything he had done wasn't a lie. And that he wouldn't run away from his own fears. On the government side, they still hadn't found any trace of Yuji. At that moment, Garrett appeared. She didn't understand why she had to be there. But Garrett was Yuji's former commander. So the government thought she might know a lot about him. Suddenly, Kazuki called them. She was currently trying to take the Thanatos system from Oslo. And their job was to support Kazuki in that mission. Yuria and Graham would also cooperate with the team. At this moment, Yuji had infiltrated Oslo's base. He eliminated the guards one by one. Meanwhile, Oslo had been waiting for Yuji for a long time. However, since Yuji had already taken down most of the guards, Oslo had to act before losing more of his forces. On Sakari's side, she was focusing on figuring out a strategy. With the help of Yuria and Garrett, Amane was extremely worried about Yuji. At that moment, Kazuki became curious. Since Amane already knew about Yuji's past, would she still be able to accept him? If Amane still hesitated, then it would be best for her to let go of it. But Amane sincerely shared that she would be willing to share half of Yuji's pain, no matter how terrible it might be. Because after learning about his painful past, she couldn't bring herself to hate Yuji. On Yuji's side, he was now facing a mysterious young man. It turned out he was a clone of Yuji created by Oslo. The two of them were facing off in an unimaginable way. At this moment, they were locked in an intense battle. However, Yuji's superior skills said it all. He would be the one to end his own suffering. But Yuji's clone successfully counterattacked. That didn't make Yuji give up. He got back up and continued to fight. For Yuji now, death was also a form of salvation. And he would be the one to kill that clone with his own hands. When he looked up at the starry sky, Yuji remembered Asako's final words before she died. That he could live a life of his own. Because of those words, Yuji saw Asako as everything to him. And from now on, he would fight for himself. And thanks to that strength, Yuji successfully defeated the clone. He was now directly facing Oslo. Oslo was provoking Yuji at that moment, with insulting words, but Yuji didn't come to listen to Oslo's talk. He came to claim Oslo's life. Then Oslo announced, the bomb in Yuji's body had only 5 minutes left. If Yuji managed to kill Oslo, then Yuji would get the key from him. This time, it was a direct confrontation. Oslo used Asako's former sword to launch his attack. And so, the two engaged in a fierce battle. However, Yuji's condition wasn't looking good. Taking advantage of the situation, Oslo stabbed Yuji with the sword. But according to Yuji's plan, he only needed an ordinary pen. That alone was enough to kill Oslo. In the end, Yuji acted flawlessly. That was exactly what Oslo had once taught him. Yuji is slowly trying to return to everyone. Because he made a promise and intends to keep it. And Asako is giving him the strength to move forward. Yuji will return to the place where he truly belongs. And so, everything finally came to an end. The bomb Yuji had planted earlier still exploded, destroying everything. However, inside the girls' hearts, Yuji's image still remains vividly alive, because to all of them, he was like family, a memory that will never be forgotten. In those moments of life, everyone stood together with friends toward a shared goal. Now, they all remember it dearly, and they continue looking ahead to a bright future that awaits, along with the cheerful laughter. That's it for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in future videos. Thank you for watching. Love you always.